Hey guys, tonight we begin a long, cold journey through the life of a medieval knight. Not the shiny, heroic kind from bedtime fairy tales, but the real version. The one that starts not with fanfare, but with separation, calluses, and the faint scent of boiled cabbage in the background. You're 7 years old, maybe 8, and your father, if he's noble enough to afford it, sends you off to serve in the house of another lord. You leave home clutching a bundle of rough linen, a stale crust of bread, and a name that barely matters yet. You won't be addressed by it anyway. From now on, you're simply boy. Your new life as a page begins at sunrise, with cold water splashed on your face and ends after scrubbing trenches, polishing boots, and sweeping ash out of the great hall. The older squires call you names. The knights don't see you at all. You sleep near the hearth, if you're lucky. If not, you find a spot in the stables. Hay makes a poor mattress, and horses don't always appreciate roommates. You watch knights train, towering men in chainmail, shouting and swinging blunted swords at each other while sparks fly. It looks powerful, terrifying, almost magical. But you fetch water, you clean armor, you kneel a lot, and you learn quickly that asking questions gets you smacked. There are lessons too, though they're not what you'd expect. You're drilled in etiquette. How to pour wine without splashing. How to bow without wobbling. How to remain perfectly still as someone screams in your face. You're taught to read just enough to recognize noble names, but not enough to write your own. Because reading's a tool. Writing's a privilege. And you're not here for privilege. You practice your footing in silence, marching back and forth across the muddy courtyard under the eye of a bored instructor with a birch stick and a low tolerance for clumsiness. One misstep earns a welt across your calf. 2. And you're scrubbing privies until your knees bleed. The phrase, character building, hasn't been invented yet, but if it had, they'd carve it into your forehead. At dinner, you stand behind your knight's chair, waiting for a grunt to ladle his stew. You never sit with them, of course. Pages eat last, in the corner, with fingers and whatever's left. It's barley and turnips again. Maybe a scrap of salted pork if the cook is feeling sentimental. Your teeth already ache. At night, you hear stories, half-whispered legends of great battles, dragons slain, maidens rescued. One older squire says his cousin killed a bear with a spear. You don't believe him. You've never seen a bear. But it helps, in the dark, to imagine you're heading towards something grand. That all of this filth, this hunger, this endless kneeling, means you're on the path to glory. Still, there's a nagging truth that tickles the back of your neck as you scratch your flea bites. Glory is a word adults use to make pain sound noble. Historians still debate whether this phase was truly about character formation or just cheap labor with a fancy title. You fall asleep to the sound of boots on stone, dogs barking in the yard, and the soft drip of rain through a crack in the roof. You dream of swords and banners and shining armor. You dream of riding through crowds who cheer your name. But when the rooster calls and you wake up, it's just cold air, stiff muscles, and another day of fetching, bowing, and being invisible. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You tug on your rough tunic and shuffle back into the hall. One more anonymous boy in a long line of future knights who will have to earn every inch of steel with scraped knees and silent obedience. You're 12 now, maybe 13, and the title of squire is finally yours. It sounds impressive, like you've graduated, but in truth, it means your burdens have grown teeth. Gone are the days of just sweeping floors and learning how not to spill soup. Now, you live in the shadow of a fully armored knight, assigned to serve him and absorb everything through exposure, injury, and repetition. You saddle his horse. You carry his weapons. You sleep next to his gear, ready to snap awake when he calls, even if it's just to hand him a belt or pour his wine. You're not his friend. You're not even his equal. You're the extension of his will, expected to anticipate it before it's spoken. Each day starts well before dawn. The rooster calls, but you're already up, tightening straps, oiling leather, and checking blades. The sword must gleam. The mail must be rust-free. And if your knight finds a nick in the edge, it's you who's reprimanded, not the iron. Your own training begins in the pale light of morning. Sword drills, over and over again, until your shoulders burn and your knuckles are raw. Your practice sword isn't elegant. It's a chunk of wood meant to mimic the weight and balance of steel. And if you drop it, you do push-ups until your arms scream. Combat forms are drilled by rote. High guard, low guard, sweep, parry, counter. The instructors bark commands, each one sharper than the last. If you move too slowly, you're pushed into the dirt. If you flinch, you're hit. It's not just about strength. It's about control, discipline, the ability to keep your footing even when your breath is ragged and your opponent's elbow is already in your ribs. Your sparring partner might be older, stronger, and annoyed at being paired with a boy. He doesn't hold back. He slams you down again and again. You learn how to fall without breaking your wrist. You also learn that bruises don't matter. What matters is getting back up every single time. And then there's the horse training. The war horse is no docile pony. It's massive, ornery, and smarter than it lets on. You spend weeks just learning how to mount without looking like a fool. Your thighs ache from trying to ride in armor that shifts with every gallop, digging into your ribs like punishment. You fall more than you ride, and each time the instructor mutters something about how the horse is still more knightly than you. When you're not in the saddle, you're tending to wounds, both your own and your master's. You clean blood from chainmail links and learn to pack cuts with moss and vinegar. You watch your knight take a blade to the shoulder during a minor border skirmish, then ride home that night like nothing happened. That's the model you're expected to live up to. Food is no reward. You eat fast, whatever is left after the Lord's table clears. Some nights it's gruel, others it's stale bread you soften with water. You're burning thousands of calories a day, and you never quite stop feeling hungry. Your ribs show, your hands crack from cold. You stop feeling the bruises because they never really leave. And still, through the bruises and dust, there are moments, tiny flashes that feed the dream. You help your knight win a small bout at a local tourney. You lift his banner just before he charges, and the crowd cheers. And for a moment, it almost feels like they're cheering for you. A noble woman hands you a favor to pass on. Her ribbon embroidered with her initials, and her fingers brush yours. You don't say a word you wouldn't dare, but you feel it for days. Historians still argue whether squires were truly respected or just tolerated until they proved useful. Some sources call them gentlemen in training. Others suggest they were treated more like high-value servants, only promoted when necessity forced the issue. There are no weekends, no breaks. When your knight is summoned, you ride with him. When he sleeps in a field, so do you. When he fights, you're behind him with a spare sword. You carry the water, you mend the gear, you clean the blood off his boots. At night, you train alone, repeating footwork until your shadow dances under torchlight. You imagine yourself not as a servant, but as a warrior in waiting. And then you stumble, your ankle buckles, and you land face down in the mud. Again. Still, you rise, because no one's going to lift you but yourself. By the time you reach your late teens, you're lean, scarred, and tougher than any childhood version of yourself could have imagined. You've endured endless drills, insults barked like commands, and bruises in places you didn't even know could bruise. And finally, when your lord deems you worthy, or simply needs another sword in the field, you're knighted. It's not always a grand ceremony. Sometimes there's no feast, no music, no trumpets. Just a knee bent in the mud, a sword tapped on your shoulders, and a quiet vow whispered between clenched teeth. You swear to protect the weak, honor the church, obey your lord, and act with valor. A noble pledge, recited with tired lips and an empty stomach. And then you stand. You're a knight now, but it doesn't feel much different, except heavier, because now, that armor you once polished for others is yours, and wearing it is its own kind of punishment. The full suit weighs anywhere between 45 to 60 pounds, more if you're marching in the rain or carrying provisions. It takes 2 squires just to get you into it, assuming you have any. Otherwise, you do it yourself, strapping buckles over chafed skin, cinching leather tight until your ribs ache. Your helmet narrows your vision to a tunnel. You can barely hear. Your sweat has nowhere to go, and every step feels like moving through mud, even on dry ground. Climbing onto your warhorse in full plate is an athletic feat all by itself. One wrong move, and you look like a beetle flipped onto its back. The romantic image of a knight gleaming in sunlight fades quickly when you realize you're a mobile furnace. Summer battles are suffocating. You march for hours under heat that cooks the inside of your helmet. Water is scarce. Breathing becomes a chore, and there's no quick relief. You can't just take the armor off. It takes too long, and the battlefield won't wait for you to cool down. So you stay in it. You bake, you sweat, you itch, and then you fight. There's a story passed around, half folklore, half dark joke, about a knight who fainted from heat and suffocated inside his own armor. Historians still debate whether that's true or just grim barrack room humor, but the fact that it's believable says enough. And the armor isn't just hard on your body, it's hard on your wallet. Maintaining it is a full-time job. You need polish, oil, replacement straps, rivets, and someone who knows what they're doing to repair dents. A deep cut-through plate means a new chest piece. If you can afford it, armor is loud too. It clinks and groans with every movement, especially after long campaigns. You start to recognize fellow knights, not by their voices, but by the sound of their armor moving. A clatter unique to each warrior, like a metallic fingerprint. Wearing it on horseback is marginally better until you fall. Then it becomes your coffin. If your horse goes down mid-charge, you tumble hard and fast, and all that weight piles on top of you. You flail like a tortoise. If no one helps, you stay there. And yet, despite all this, you wear it with pride. Because armor isn't just protection, it's status. It tells the world you've survived the furnace of training, the cruelty of hierarchy, and the test of war. It means you belong, but you also learn to fear it. You know its limitations. A strong crossbow bolt can pierce it. A mace can crush the bones beneath it. It's not invincible. Neither are you. During siege duty, you're often forced to sleep in your armor, or at least half of it, in case of surprise attack. It digs into your sides while you lie on stone or hard earth. You wake up sore and stiffer than the boards in the ramparts. The joints rust if not oiled properly. And after rain, the stink lingers for days. There's no room for modesty. You relieve yourself where you can, when you can. Removing everything takes too long, so you adapt. You stop caring. Dignity is a luxury you left behind with your childhood shoes, and sometimes, though you'd never say it aloud, you resent the very thing you once dreamed of wearing. Still, each time you lift that visor and look out at the world, even through the narrowest slit, there's a strange mix of dread and duty. You signed up for this. Or rather, you were born into it. And now, the armor is a part of you. Not just a uniform, but your shell, your cage, and your legacy. You tighten the straps again, because the next battle is coming, and you don't get to take the day off. Every morning starts the same way, with aching muscles, stiff joints, and a dull throb in your shoulders from wearing that iron shell. But there's no time to stretch or sigh. You're expected in the yard. The blade won't swing itself, and your sword arm doesn't keep its edge by accident. You spar, you lunge, you parry, again, again, again. There's no glamour in it, just repetition, sweat, and the sharp clang of metal echoing off stone walls. Your knuckles split, Your breath fogs in the cold. Your trainer, an older knight with one good eye and half an ear, says you're still too slow, even though your legs tremble from fatigue. You've come to learn that the body remembers. It stores every strike, every fall, every blister. And while time may dull the bruises, the soreness stays just beneath the skin, ready to bloom with each morning's practice. Discipline is the only currency you're allowed to hoard. You move when ordered, speak when spoken to, and kneel when required. Any deviation is met with correction, not discussion. You are iron molded by sharper iron, and when training's done, your real duties begin. You inspect your gear, you repair what you can. Leather frays, mail links bend, blades dull. You oil your sword until it gleams and polish your breastplate, even though you know it will be scuffed again within hours. Then comes patrol duty. Mounted or on foot, you're responsible for enforcing your Lord's peace, whatever that means this week. Sometimes it's guarding grain shipments. Sometimes it's mediating land disputes between peasants who can't agree on which pig belongs to whom. Sometimes it's hunting bandits through the woods until your boots are soaked and your patience runs thin. Knighthood, you realize, is not about battlefield valor. It's about managing chaos. You're a weapon and a sheriff, a bodyguard and a bureaucrat. And most days, the sword stays sheathed, not out of peace, but because the paperwork takes longer than the killing. Yet the sword is never far. You feel its weight always, and you're expected to wield it with honor. Honor. That word again. It haunts everything. You're told it must be upheld above all else, that it's what separates you from mercenaries, thieves, and savages. But no one ever tells you what it actually means in practice. Does it mean sparing the farmer who stole grain to feed his family, or executing him to make an example? Historians still argue whether the strict martial codes of knighthood were ever truly enforced, or if they were more moral wallpaper, a performance of virtue laid over a brutal job. In your world, honor often bows to necessity. When your lord commands it, you must act, honorably or not. Ride into the next village, collect overdue taxes, intimidate those who resist, burn the fields, if it comes to that. You don't get to refuse. You took the oath, and no matter how tired, how sore, how disillusioned you feel, you must still stand tall. You are the image of chivalry to those who see you, a symbol, an ideal, even when you're just trying not to fall off your horse from exhaustion. The squire assigned to you, nervous, skinny, eyes wide, is a mirror of who you once were. You catch him watching you bandage your hand after a skirmish. He asks, "Nothing." You say nothing. But you both know he's wondering whether it's worth it. That night, you fall asleep in your gear, armor half off, boots still wet. You dream of a duel, one you can't win. Your opponent is faceless, fast, and every strike lands just before yours. You wake up before dawn, sore all over again. Your sword waits beside the bed. So does the routine. Discipline is the rhythm of your life now. Not the dramatic kind found in ballads, but the grinding, relentless version. the kind that slowly wears away what softness remains in you. Still, you strap on your armor. Still, you ride out into the grey, because nights don't rest. They endure. At some point, the armor becomes an extension of you. You don't notice the weight as much. Your joints still ache, but you walk straighter. You lift your sword like it belongs in your hand. And then comes the moment you thought you wanted. Your first official combat. Your first real taste of war. It's not the glorious charge sung about in ballads. It's a slow, anxious march across churned mud, beneath a sky too grey to give you any poetic lighting. Your visor fogs with each breath. Your heart thuds loud enough to drown out the horns. And your stomach, empty. Too much fear to eat. The night beside you mutters a prayer. You try to remember one yourself, but settle for gripping the reins tighter. You think of everything you were trained to do. Formation, flanking, breaking shield walls, protecting your lord's banner. But when the enemy crests the hill and the order comes to advance, all you feel is the rush and then noise. Steel crashes against steel. Horses scream. Men shout in every direction. It's not a duel. It's a pileup. A swirling mess of limbs, armor, weapons, mud, and panic. You swing, blindly at first. Instinct and muscle memory guide your blade. There's no elegance, just survival. You take a hit, right in the ribs. It rattles your bones. You counter, shield raised, and barely block the next. A flash of movement. Was that an axe? You duck, stumble, eyes, push forward. This isn't about heroism. It's about not dying. A fallen horse blocks your path. You step over a body, still breathing, moaning. You keep going. You have to. You don't even know whose side he was on. You lose your footing once. Your knees slam into the mud, and for a brief second you think it's over. But someone grabs your arm. Another knight, a squire, doesn't matter, and hauls you up, back into the fray. Eventually, the retreat horn sounds. Or maybe it's a rally call. Hard to tell. Either way, the lines fall apart. Men stagger away, wounded or too tired to lift their swords. You're bleeding from your forearm. You didn't even feel the cut until now. Back at camp, someone pulls the dented armor from your shoulders. Your shirt beneath is soaked with sweat, mud, and blood. Some of it not yours. You sit down and immediately regret it. Every muscle complains, your ears ring, your vision blurs when you look at firelight. The healer checks your arm, shrugs, and pours something that burns like betrayal into the wound. Not deep, he says, as if that's supposed to comfort you. Then he moves on. Dinner is cold stew and hard bread. You try to chew, but your jaw aches from clenching it all day. No one speaks much. A few men laugh, too loud, too long. It's the sound of people trying to pretend this is normal. You think of the oath you took, the one about protecting the weak, showing mercy, defending honor. But today didn't feel like any of that. It felt like trying to stay alive in a mud pit. Historians still argue whether medieval battles were structured affairs, guided by chivalric codes or disorganized slaughters where luck mattered more than valor. judging by what you've just experienced, you lean toward the second. And this was just a border clash, a minor skirmish over grazing rights or a tax disagreement. You don't even know. You weren't told why you fought, just where and when. You try to sleep, but every time you close your eyes, you see the charge again. The blur, the noise, the faces. You wonder how many more of these you'll survive, and if you'll ever feel clean again. After your first real battle, something changes, not just in your body, which now carries an almost constant ache, but in your mind. The fantasies you once clung to, the gallant rescues, the glorious duels, begin to erode under the weight of lived experience. But just when your bruises start to fade, you're summoned again. Not for war, but for something even more dangerous. A tournament. At first, you feel a flicker of excitement. Tournaments are supposed to be grand affairs. Banners flying, trumpets blaring, crowds cheering your name. They're the nightly equivalent of a party, right? Wrong. The moment you arrive, the illusion begins to crack. The tournament grounds are teeming with tension. Knights from across the region have gathered, not just to compete, but to settle scores. Old rivalries resurface. Smiles hide sharp intentions. Nobles watch from shaded pavilions while you, the competitors, sweat beneath heavy mail in the open sun. There's pageantry, yes. Your name is announced, your colors displayed. But you quickly realize it's all theater for the audience. Beneath the pomp lies a very real threat of injury, humiliation, or worse. The joust is first. You mount your destrier, adjust your helmet, and accept the lance. A weapon you've trained with, but never truly wielded at this speed. Across the field, your opponent lowers his visor. He's bigger, his armor's newer. You're already calculating how to fall without shattering a collarbone. The horn sounds, you charge. The world narrows to the rhythm of hooves and the weight of the lance against your arm. Impact is instant, like being struck by a battering ram. Your opponent's lance splinters against your shield, and you barely hold your seat. The crowd roars. You can't tell if it's for you or him. You pull around for another pass, and another. By the fourth, you're seeing stars. Your arm is numb, and then you fall, not gracefully. You're flung backward, flat on your back, air punched out of your lungs by your own breastplate. For a moment, all you can hear is your pulse. You're helped up by squires. You wave off the physician. You tell everyone you're fine. But your ribs feel cracked, and your pride is dented beyond repair. Later you fight in the melee, a brutal free-for-all where dozens of armored men charge into a closed arena and batter each other senseless with blunted weapons. In theory, it's a test of skill. In reality, it's a storm of elbows, knees, and hammering swords. You're hit from behind, trampled, slammed to the ground, and dragged out by the ankle when you stop moving. Part of the game, someone says. Historians still debate whether these tournaments were noble contests of chivalry or barely disguised blood sports designed to entertain and maim. You don't need a scholar to tell you. You've seen the bruises. You've coughed the dust. You've smelled the copper tang of blood behind your teeth. At the feast afterward, The nobles drink wine and laugh while you sit silently, wincing with every movement. Your hand shakes when you lift your mug. You wonder if anyone notices or cares. Some knights treat tournaments as their stage, chasing fame and noble marriage. Others use them to settle private feuds under the legal cover of sport. A few simply enjoy the violence. You're not sure where you fall anymore. A lady passes you a cloth for your split lip. You nod politely, but you barely register her name. You're still replaying the moment your head hit the ground. That night, as you lie awake on a straw mattress that reeks of sweat and old blood, you ask yourself a quiet question. Why do I keep doing this? But there's no answer. Just the sound of someone vomiting in the corner and a bard tuning a lute outside, singing of heroic battles and dashing knights, none of whom ever limp when they walk. In the quiet moments between battles and tournaments, when the armor's off and your sword is propped in a corner, you begin to realize something unsettling. Your horse knows you better than anyone else, and that's because your warhorse sees you at your worst. Your destrier, powerful, temperamental, and frighteningly clever, is no mere transportation. It's a partner, a weapon, and sometimes a liability with hooves. You've trained with it for years, learning to stay in sync with its movements, to read its moods, to keep it calm under a rain of arrows or a roar of drums, and still it hates you sometimes. You spend more time grooming and feeding your horse than you do eating proper meals. Its tack must be oiled, its hooves checked, its mane braided to avoid tangles during battle. When the two of you ride out, people cheer for you. But without that beast beneath you, you're just a tired man in 100 pounds of steel. It knows its own strength. It knows you're vulnerable when you dismount. One misstep, one slip of the saddle or bucking tantrum, and you could easily be thrown, trampled, or crushed under its weight. And some days, especially when you forget the apple you usually sneak it, you wonder if it's thinking about it. Your relationship is built on routine and necessity. You feed it, and in return, it charges into chaos at your command. It doesn't love you, not in the way modern pet owners imagine. It tolerates you. Occasionally, it trusts you. Mostly, it tolerates you. And during war, that mutual understanding is everything. You learn to give commands with a twitch of your thigh, a squeeze of your heel. You learn to listen to the subtle shifts in its weight, the nervous dance of its feet before a charge. It knows before you do when something is wrong. It hesitates when the ground is unstable. It tenses when enemies approach. It smells death long before you see it. Historians still argue over just how important cavalry really was in medieval warfare, whether the mounted knight was truly decisive or merely symbolic. But ask anyone who's ridden into battle. Without your horse, you're just a slow-moving target. Of course, the animal needs care, endless care. And if it falls sick or lames a leg, you're grounded, humiliated, and often reassigned to less prestigious duties. That's why many knights have more than one horse. The destrier for combat, the palfrey for travel, a pack horse for gear. Maintaining them costs a fortune. And heaven help you if one dies on campaign. Replacement is expensive, and grieving is not an option. One night you know keeps the horseshoes of every fallen mount nailed to the wall of his tent, like grim trophies. You wonder sometimes if that's respect or guilt. There are also the accidents. A knight you trained with once took a hoof to the ribs before a skirmish. He rode anyway. Didn't even finish the charge before vomiting inside his helmet and falling off. He never returned. You heard whispers of internal bleeding, or maybe shame. Either way, the horse survived. The knight did not. Still, you saddle up each time, because no matter how dangerous your mount may be, it's safer than facing battle on foot, where armor is slower than arrows, and every step through the mud makes you easier to kill. Before every campaign, you whisper something to your horse. Not a prayer, just a habit. A quiet routine meant to calm your nerves more than the animals. You don't believe in superstitions, but you do believe in survival. And that means trusting the creature beneath you more than you trust most men. At night, you sleep close enough to hear its breathing. The deep, steady rhythm sometimes lulls you to sleep better than any lullaby. Sometimes you dream that you're galloping across an open field. No war, no banners, just the wind and the sound of hooves. You always wake up to saddle sores and a sore knee. Still you rise, because knights may fight for honor or gold or duty, but they always ride for survival. And the horse, it just runs forward into whatever comes next. You wake before dawn, as usual, with the smell of hay, sweat, and damp leather still clinging to your nostrils. You reach for your gambeson, a thick, quilted padding that goes under your armor, and wince as you shrug it over the bruise blooming on your shoulder. You haven't had a proper bath in days, and it's beginning to show. The truth is, you stink. Everyone stinks. But you, more than most, because your life is wrapped in layers of fabric and steel that trap every drop of sweat, every fleck of dried blood, every flea bite and blister. The hygiene of a night is not the glamorous image you once imagined. There are no perfumed baths in marble tubs, no leisurely towelings by attentive squires, just cold water, coarse linen rags, and the faint hope that no one will notice how bad you smell under the armor. Spoiler, they notice. You scrape what grime you can from your skin. Your fingernails are blackened. Your teeth ache. You chew mint leaves if you can find them, or wood shavings if you can't. Anything to mask the taste of bad meat and old water. You used to care about appearances, how your surcoat hung, how your hair looked before a tourney. Now, you're just trying not to grow mold under your cuirass. Your helmet, once polished to a mirror shine, is scratched and dented. The padding inside has soaked up so much sweat that it squelches when you press it to your head. Still you wear it. You have to. And the armor. It is both shield and prison. After a long day's march or battle, peeling it off is like shedding your own skin. You can feel the imprint of every buckle, every strap, embedded in your flesh. But removing it is only half the battle. Then comes the cleaning. You scrub it with sand and oil, work the joints with a cloth to keep them from rusting. The stink of rusted iron mixed with human sweat is so pungent, it becomes part of you. You smell like war, even in peace, and peace is never quiet. Castles, those symbols of power, are loud, cramped, and endlessly uncomfortable. You're stationed in one now. Rats scurry beneath the floorboards. The rushes on the hall floor are supposed to freshen the room, but mostly just trap filth. The draft from the arrow slits never stops. You sleep wrapped in a cloak, tucked into a corner like luggage. The food doesn't help. Salted meat, barley mash, and the occasional root vegetable. You try not to think about the last time you had something fresh. You certainly can't cook for yourself. Not while patrolling, not while wearing 2 layers of metal. And the campfires you gather around are more for warmth than gourmet meals. Historians still argue over how bad medieval hygiene really was. Some say that upper classes bathed more than we assume. Others insist that most people, even knights, went weeks without washing anything but their hands. But from where you sit, with grime between your toes and fleas nesting in your collar, it sure feels like the dirty version is closer to truth. You remember once riding past a peasant field during a slow march. One of the local children pinched their nose and laughed as your column passed. "The iron men smell like pigs," they shouted. No one corrected them. Your squire does his best. He hauls water when he can, oils your boots, brushes your horse. But there's only so much one boy can do against the tide of bodily decay. You're aging faster than you should. You feel it in your joints when you bend to strap your greaves. You feel it in your gums when you bite down on a hard bread and your molar wobbles. You once dreamed of shining on the battlefield. Now you're more concerned about fungus growing between your toes. But there's no time to wallow in self-pity. The horn sounds outside. A patrol is forming. Another show of force for the locals. Another long ride through muddy fields and tense villages where you're both protector and threat. You splash your face with cold water. It doesn't help much. You cinch your belt and pull on your gloves. They're damp. Always damp. You exhale through your nose and strap on the helmet. You'll stink, yes, but you'll survive. And at this point in your career, that's the closest thing to glory. You ride with your patrol into the countryside, and the rhythm of the hooves is almost hypnotic. The landscape rolls out in browns and greys, distant forests, thatched villages, low stone fences, and it's quiet enough that your armor creaks louder than the birds. You're not here to fight, not today. You're here to remind people that you exist. This is part of your duty too. Territorial responsibility. Keeping the peace, showing the banner, making sure taxes are paid, and no one gets any ideas about rebellion. It's called maintaining order. But to most villagers, you're just another source of dread. As you ride through the muddy lanes of a farming hamlet, children run inside, old men glance away, a pig squeals. You keep your hand close to your sword, not out of fear, but because that's what they expect of you. You dismount near the manor house, really just a larger wooden building with slightly straighter walls than the rest. The local reeve steps out, bows deeply, and immediately starts explaining some problem. A dispute over grazing land, a missing pig, maybe a rumored poacher. You nod along, not really listening, because you've heard this 100 times before. But you still have to act. That's the job. You walk the boundary lines. You question a few nervous peasants. You write down names with the tip of your dagger in a piece of wax. Your squire tags behind, trying to keep pace, holding your helmet under one arm and sneezing from the cold. The disputes are always the same. Neighbors squabbling over land, theft of chickens, accusations of sorcery. You're not a judge, but your presence alone tends to settle things, or at least shove them into silence. Once, a farmer begged you to intervene when a rival diverted water from his field. You nodded solemnly, offered some vague words about loyalty and peace, and rode off. 2 weeks later, the farmer was found drowned in that same irrigation ditch. No one said a word. It's the sort of justice that isn't written in law, but in fear. Historians still argue whether knights were effective local leaders or just ironclad bullies who reinforced a feudal elite. The truth, you suspect, lies somewhere muddy in the middle, like your boots after today's ride. As you trot back toward the castle, your horse slips slightly in the churned road. You steady him with practiced hands. The land is tired, and so are you. Territorial control isn't just about maps. It's about presence. You patrol not to fight, but to remind everyone who holds the sword and who doesn't. You uphold the king's peace, but really, it's the Lord's. Or maybe it's yours. Hard to say. Once, you broke up a brawl in a village square. 2 men had drawn blades over some insult about a goat. You stepped between them and drew your own sword. Not to fight, just to be seen. They dropped theirs immediately. That was one of your better days. Other times, the violence isn't so clean. You've had to enforce evictions, burn a hut or two, chain a thief to a post in the square. You didn't invent the rules. You just carry them out. With armor on, you pass another group of peasants on the way home, huddled around a fire. They don't wave. One spits into the dirt after you pass. Your squire notices. Should I say something? You shake your head. There's nothing to say. Their resentment is a dull, constant background hum in this world. Not loud enough to be a threat. Not yet. Back in the castle, you report your patrol. The seneschal nods, half listening. You hand off your findings, return to the stables, and rub down your horse yourself. The squire tries, but he's clumsy, and the beast deserves better than rough hands. Afterward, you lean against the stable wall, breathing in the scent of hay, manure, and your own stale sweat. You're a knight. You uphold order. You wear your lord's colors, carry his banner, enforce his laws. But sometimes you wonder whose peace you're really protecting. Yours, theirs, or someone long dead who once drew a map and decided that this patch of earth should belong to that family forever. You push the thought away and head inside. Supper is waiting. Mutton again. The food is warm at least. That's the best you can say for it. You sit at a long wooden table with the other knights, damp from patrol and dull from duty. The great hall flickers with torchlight, and the smell of grease, smoke, and wet wool fills the air. You chew slowly. It's always the same. Mutton, or beef stew, rough bread, the occasional onion if the stores allow. You don't speak much during meals. The others don't either. You all know the rhythm by now. Eat, drink, rest, and prepare for the next order. Someone tells a story about a skirmish years ago. A lance shattered on impact. A rider thrown so hard, his helmet split like an egg. You smile politely. You've heard the story before, though the speaker tells it as if it happened to him and not someone 3 lords ago. Your bones ache more than usual tonight. Combat isn't always the frantic clash of armies or the roaring chaos of sieges. More often it's personal, ugly. A man on horseback, a man on foot, a narrow bridge, a muddy hill, a broken fence. You don't hear the crowd, or the music, or the stories. You hear the breath in your own throat, the rattle of your armor, and the wet sound of something breaking that shouldn't. You remember one fight vividly, not a grand battle, just a skirmish. A boy, barely a man, rushed at you with a pike in shaking hands. He didn't shout, didn't even flinch. He just ran. You blocked, twisted, and swept him aside with your shield. His head hit a rock. That was it. The pike is still in the armory somewhere, nicked and bent. You don't think anyone else even noticed. The battlefield is rarely glorious. It's chaotic, loud, and smells like blood, mud, and old fear. When it rains, everything turns slick and slow. You slip more. Horses panic. Arrows veer off. When it's hot, men faint in their armor before swords are even drawn. You fought in thick woods where you couldn't see 5 feet ahead, and on open plains where the sun blinded you from behind your visor. You've trudged through rivers, scaled freezing hills, and defended bridges that weren't worth the blood spilled on them. Historians still argue whether medieval warfare was primarily about strategy or pure attrition. You know better. It was about exhaustion. The side that stayed standing usually won. Once, you stood ankle-deep in churned mud beside a banner fluttering weakly in the wind. The enemy was already retreating. But no one cheered. You all just looked around, counting who was still alive. Someone found a boot with a foot still inside it. No one claimed it. Back in the Great Hall, a bard plays a soft tune in the corner. It's meant to soothe, but your mind drifts back to the battlefield. Always does. A knight across from you picks at his food with his dagger. His hands shake a little when he reaches for his cup. No one mentions it. Everyone knows why. Some wounds never heal, and not all of them are visible. You think about the mail shirt you wear beneath your plate. Each link once forged by hand, thousands of them. It saved your life once. A sword that would have gutted you instead tore through 2 layers of padding and stopped just before your skin. You wore that mail again the next day, bloodstain and all. They say knights are fearless. That's the image. The shining armor, the poised blade, the calm gaze beneath the helmet. But every knight you've known have been afraid. The difference is that you ride forward anyway. You've faced mercenaries with no code, peasants with pitchforks, rival knights with more money and better gear. You fought for lords who barely knew your name. in places you'll never see again. And still, you rode. Because that's the job. You glance at the others around the table. Some are younger, still proud. Some are older, quieter. One has a bandaged hand. Another still walks with a limp from a siege 2 winters ago. You're all tired. But tomorrow, if the horn sounds, you'll all ride out again. Not because of glory, not because of honor, because you were trained to, molded to, forged to. You finish your meal and rise, joints cracking. The firelight catches the edge of your sword where it leans by the wall. You don't bother sheathing it. You'll need it again soon enough. You step outside into the night air. It's crisp, almost clean. The stars are clear. For a moment you breathe deeply, and it almost feels peaceful, but you know better. You don't sleep well anymore. Not since the first time someone screamed your name just before you cut them down. The wound looks shallow, but you know better than to trust appearances. A blade doesn't need to go deep to be dangerous. Even a scratch from a rusty edge can end you days later, quietly, in a fevered stupor surrounded by monks who don't know what else to do but pray louder. You sit on a stool while the surgeon inspects your leg. He's not really a doctor, just a man who's done this longer than anyone else survived doing it. His tools are iron, blackened from the fire, and smell faintly of wine, herbs, and something metallic that makes your stomach turn. You bite down on a piece of cloth. He doesn't warn you before he pours something on the gash. It burns. Of course it burns. You don't scream, not loudly. This is what happens after battle. When the trumpet falls silent and the banners droop in the breeze, the real reckoning begins. The wounded pile up in the castle's courtyard, on the chapel floor, wherever they can be laid out and cleaned. Some cry, some don't move at all. And then there are the smells. Burnt flesh from cautery irons, rotting wounds packed with moss, the sharp stink of spilled bowels. You learn to breathe through your mouth and keep moving. A knight's survival rate was never as high as the stories make it sound. Armor helped, yes, but even a bruised rib could puncture a lung if you fell hard enough. A cracked tooth could abscess. A sprain could turn gangrenous if you rode on it for 3 days straight. There's no such thing as minor injuries anymore. Historians still debate whether medieval surgery advanced at all during the high chivalric period. You'd argue it just got more creative. One time you saw a man trepanned, skull bored open, to let the evil air out. He walked again. That doesn't make it sane. You've seen men stitched up with horsehair and linen, flesh held shut with wax-coated string, and burns sealed by pressing coins fresh from the forge against skin. You don't know if it helped. You do know it made them scream. But what choice is there? There's no retirement plan. No noble healing house tucked away in the countryside. If you can stand, you ride. If you can't, you pray someone remembers your name. You once had a wound that festered for weeks. It wasn't from a battle, just a training accident. Your shoulder blade had been scraped against a splintered lance, and you ignored it. Then it swelled, turned red, hot to the touch. Fever came next. For 3 nights you floated somewhere between waking and death. whispering apologies to no one in particular. You lived. Barely. They say your constitution must be strong. You know better. It was luck. Pure, dumb, unsanitary luck. Now, every new pain makes you cautious. You prod bruises, sniff scrapes. You notice how one finger aches more than the others after holding your sword too tight for too long. You notice everything because missing one detail could end you. The surgeon packs your leg wound with mashed herbs and tight linen. He tells you to stay off it. You both laugh. You limp out of the chamber, slower than before. No one offers to help. They're used to it. You're used to it. There's a young squire on the training field, swinging wildly at a straw dummy. He's full of energy, all flailing limbs and loud grunts. You remember being that boy. You also remember how quickly that shine wore off. He sees your limp and pauses. You nod once. He returns it. That's all the interaction you need. He'll learn soon enough. In the chapel, candles flicker across rows of bowed heads. Some knights kneel out of habit, others out of fear. You join them because you need something to anchor you, something to make the pain seem worth it. The priest murmurs blessings, and you mouth the words too, just in case. God might hear you, he might not. But if you die tonight, at least you asked. You think back to a knight you rode beside last year. Good man, honest. Thought the world still had order. Took a crossbow bolt to the side while trying to protect a retreating farmer. The bolt snapped when they tried to remove it. He lasted 2 days. The second night, he begged for someone to finish it. No one did. The castle healer said the liver had been pierced. You nodded like you understood. All you really heard was, no chance. You wake up most nights now. Not because of dreams, but because of the pain. It shifts. Shoulder, back, knees. Some of it's old damage. Some of it's just time creeping in. You can't tell which anymore. There's an old saying, a knight's strength is in his scars. Maybe. But you've seen scars that bend fingers forever, that make men wince when they lift a spoon, that end careers without ending lives. The hallways echo as you walk them, slowly, carefully. The torchlight glints off the polished helmets lining the walls. Some of those belong to knights who didn't make it past their first winter campaign. Their names are carved below, but the carvings fade fast. The pain never does. You haven't slept well in weeks, and tonight won't be any different. Your body aches in too many places to count, but that's not what keeps you up. It's the sound of hooves, real or imagined, on distant stones. The flicker of movement beyond the torchlight. The restless whisper that danger never really leaves. It just waits for you to blink. This is what a knight's life becomes. Endless vigilance, even behind castle walls. Once, you believed in rest. That after battle there would be recovery. That the hard-earned peace was something real, something you could breathe in. But peace is fragile. Every feast, every fire-lit story, every shared flask of wine is haunted by the knowledge that tomorrow it could all burn. Tonight is no different. You walk the perimeter of the inner bailey, listening. The guard at the north tower nods to you, but doesn't speak. He's young, still has both ears, still wears his belt high and straight. He'll learn too. Your sword is sheathed, but never far. And your hands twitch from time to time. Ghost movements from past fights, phantom instincts. It's not paranoia, it's training. Training that took years to drill into your bones. And not the fun kind either. No galloping across flower-strewn meadows, lance gleaming in the sun. The real training started when you were barely old enough to lift a wooden blade, let alone swing it. Pain was your tutor, repetition your prayer. You woke before dawn. You cleaned horses, shoveled dung, fetched water, ran errands until your legs buckled. And only then were you allowed to train. Sword drills until your hands bled. Shield work until your arms screamed. Then mounted combat, where every mistake meant falling into mud, or worse, under a hoof. Bruises were badges of progress. Broken fingers meant you were at least trying. Train as you fight, they said. So they beat you like enemies would, and you learned. Historians still argue whether nightly training was truly effective or merely a brutal rite of passage. You know this much. It weeded out the weak. It didn't build heroes, it forged survivors. Your own mentor was a weathered old brute with more scars than teeth. He taught you that hesitation kills, that chivalry is nice, but not if it gets you stabbed. He once broke your rib for not watching your left flank. Told you afterward that it was better you learned that lesson from him, and not a Saracen blade. Fair point, you suppose. By the time you were dubbed, your childhood had been hammered out of you. There was no going back. You were a knight, sworn and armored, but also hollowed. And in the space left behind, discipline took root. Iron discipline, that's what they called it. The ability to ride for 3 days without sleep. To stand in formation while arrows sang above. To bury a friend in the morning and charge into war by sunset. You didn't cry. You didn't flinch. You didn't complain. You just endured. The church praised this quality, said it made you godly. The lords loved it, said it made you reliable. The people feared it. That part always surprised you. You pass the stables now, their warm scent of hay and sweat, oddly comforting. One of the horses nickers softly at your presence. You pat its flank. Even animals can tell when you're carrying too much on your shoulders. You remember when you first realized you could never let your guard down. It was after your first campaign. You returned home expecting praise and celebration. Instead, you found a pile of taxes to collect, disputes to settle, a village that blamed you for bandits, and a noble who wanted more. There's no end to the wait. Victory only means new duties. They don't tell you that during training. You thought the hardest part would be the fighting. But it's the responsibility. The endless pressure to be unshakable, to be an example, to be perfect. And when you fail, because you will, you do so in front of everyone, and someone else always pays the price. There's a courtyard near the armory where the squires gather for sparring. You watch them from the shadows sometimes. Their movements are still raw, but eager. You envy them, not for their youth, but for their certainty. They still believe this life means something. You used to believe too, that every sacrifice kept the realm safe, that every drop of sweat and blood watered the tree of order, that you were part of something larger. Now you wonder. A bard once told you that knights were the bones of kingdoms, silent, strong, unacknowledged, holding everything upright while others walked above. It sounded noble at the time. Now it just sounds exhausting. Your patrol ends where it began, at the keep's main hall. A fire burns low in the hearth. Shadows dance on the banners hanging from the ceiling beams, sigils of houses long faded or absorbed. You wonder how many of those names still mean anything. How many fell to the same grind you're enduring now? There's bread on the table, cold but welcome. You tear off a piece and sit. You don't realize how tired you are until your elbows hit the wood and stay there. Another night survived. You'll sleep now, for a few hours if you're lucky. Maybe dream of a place where no one expects you to carry everything. Maybe not. Your last thought before sleep is simple, familiar, and dull. Tomorrow will hurt. You wake before sunrise. Not because you want to, but because your body has learned not to trust the dark. There's that split-second disorientation, stone ceiling, a crackling fire that's long gone out, the cold nipping at your fingers. For a moment, you wonder where you are, what day it is, if the castle is still standing. But then the stiffness in your shoulders reminds you you're home, in your hall, and it's time to be a knight again. Except this morning, you won't be preparing for a siege or a patrol. You're preparing for a tournament. Ah yes, the glamorous part. Or so everyone thinks. You eat what passes for breakfast. Some salted pork and a piece of yesterday's bread. And then begin the exhausting ritual of dressing for performance. Because that's what this is, really. A bloody, bruising, bone-rattling performance for the nobility and the crowds. Jousts, melees, sword duels. They look like heroic sports from the outside. Flashy armor, charging steeds, banners flapping in the wind. But once you're inside the lists, it's all noise and chaos and impact. Your teeth rattle from each tilt. Your arms go numb from the hits. And that's if you win. Historians still argue whether tournaments were genuine training for war or just theatrical pageantry. You know the truth lies somewhere in between. You can die in a tournament, and many do. You've seen it happen. One knight took a lance through the eye slit. Another was trampled after falling from his horse in the melee. A third bled out from a sword cut that caught the artery beneath his armpit, where the armor gaps. All three of them were better than you. But they're not here now, are they? Your armor is polished until it gleams. Not because it helps you fight better, but because your lord expects you to look the part. And because the crowds love a shining knight. People cheer louder when your plate glitters like a mirror. They don't care what it weighs or how it restricts your breathing. Your squire buckles the last strap under your chin. You nod once and mount your destrier, a beast almost as trained and disciplined as you are. You've spent years building trust with him. He doesn't spook easily. He doesn't veer. And when you ride into the arena together, you both understand. This isn't just sport. It's survival. Because while some knights go into tournaments to impress ladies and lords, you go in to prove you're still the kind of man people don't challenge lightly. The trumpets blare. The wooden stands are full. Flags ripple from every corner. It's hot, too hot for steel. You feel your skin begin to cook underneath. Your opponent rides out, lance raised. You recognize him. Younger, flashier, fewer scars. A crowd favorite. You'll fix that. The first charge is always the worst. Your vision narrows. Your horse explodes forward. And then it's thunder and pain and wood splinters flying like wasps. The lances break. The impact jars your bones. But you stay mounted. Round 1, draw. You circle again. Breathing hard inside the helmet. The air smells like sweat, horse, and fear. Round 2 ends with you catching a glancing blow on your shoulder, close to the neck. A little lower, and it would have been a short career. 3rd round, your lance finds his chest plate just beneath the crest. He flies, hits the ground with a dull, meaty thud. The crowd goes wild. You don't raise your arms. You dismount and check if he's breathing. He is, barely. A few broken ribs. Maybe a punctured lung. He'll live. He won't ride for a while. The prize? A purse of silver and a nod from the local baron. No one offers you water or thanks, but you do get something else. An invitation to the melee this afternoon. You want to say no, but knights don't refuse. So after lunch, if you can call salted beef and tepid ale lunch, you strap on your dented gear and march back into the ring for a brawl with 10 other knights. No lances this time, just blunted swords and shields. It's not elegant, it's not noble, it's chaos. Steel rings against steel. Someone grabs your arm. Another swings at your legs. You take a hit to the head so hard your ears ring for a full minute. You fight like a beast. Not a knight, not a hero, just a man trying to not be the one left bleeding in the dust. You lose track of time. When it's over, you can't remember how many you knocked down or who declared the winner. You only remember limping off the field and vomiting behind a stable. The squires cheer. They think it's glorious. You feel like you aged a decade. Later that evening, there's a feast. Roasted boar, minstrels playing, women in silks, men in bright colors. You sit at the side table, helmet off, face bruised, too tired to speak. A young lady flutters her lashes at you. You nod, but your eyes say, not tonight, not ever. The Lord raises his goblet and praises the skill and valor of the combatants. You raise yours back, but your hand shakes. Your knuckles are purple. Someone jokes about how the melee is more dangerous than war. You laugh along, but it's true. You don't go to war every week, but you get asked to show up for these spectacles again and again. Because as long as the nobles need entertainment, the knights need to fight. It keeps you visible. It keeps you employed. And it keeps you hurting. You finally stumble back to your quarters well past midnight. Every step is a groan. You peel off the armor piece by piece, wincing at each bruise revealed. Your fingers are swollen. Your knees feel like wood. You sit on the edge of the cot and just breathe. Was it worth it? You don't answer. You just lie down and wait for morning to find you again. You wake to the sound of church bells tolling faintly in the distance. Not the joyous kind, they rarely are, but the heavy, slow peal that seems to echo off every stone and bone in your body. Sunday Mass, Or maybe a funeral. Hard to tell these days. Either way, you're not going. You've got responsibilities. Not just your aching joints or half-healed bruises from yesterday's tournament. You're a landed knight now. Which means the battles never end, only shift in form. From the arena to the manor, from the sword to the scroll, because when you're not fighting other men, you're fighting land, taxes, borders and disputes, territorial responsibility, that glorious burden nobody warned you about. This isn't a castle out of a fairy tale. It's a drafty old stone block with a leaky roof and 2 fireplaces that barely warm your knees. Your domain? A few muddy villages, some barley fields, a rickety wooden mill, and a forest crawling with poachers and wolves. And all of it is yours to manage. You trudge out into the courtyard. A peasant is waiting, cap in hand, eyes low. There's been a dispute over grazing rights again. 2 families, both under your protection, are threatening to kill each other over 5 goats and a strip of land barely wide enough to lie down in. You try to mediate. You listen, you nod. You try to keep your voice calm and knightly, even though your patience is thinner than your purse. They want you to be judge, jury, executioner, and therapist. You settle the issue for now, but you know it'll flare up again next week. Later, the steward brings you the tax rolls. Not enough grain has come in from the northern farms. A bad harvest, lazy serfs, or theft. You'll have to investigate, because the local lord will still demand his share. And if you don't deliver, you're the one who gets punished. Historians still debate how much autonomy landed knights truly had. Some argue you were little more than glorified rent collectors, squeezed between the nobility above and the peasants below. Others claim knights like you held real, independent power, mini-lords in your own right. You know better. You're the sponge in the middle, soaking up everyone else's pressure, with no one to squeeze you out. Midday, you take a patrol with 2 retainers. The roads have been quiet lately, but there are rumors of outlaws in the woods. The kind that don't just steal bread. They kill taxmen and vanish like smoke. You ride through the trees slowly, eyes scanning the shadows. Nothing today, but you still don't breathe easy. On the way back, you pass a burned-out cottage. The thatch is blackened. The stones are cracked from heat. You stop, ask around. Turns out the old woman who lived there died last week. Her nephew set fire to it in a drunken rage after she refused to give him her coin stash. So now you have to find him, pass judgment, and probably build another cottage. All because one man couldn't handle grief and ale at the same time. You ride home with the weight pressing on your shoulders heavier than any armor. Governance, justice, protection. These are your duties too. You're not just a warrior anymore. You're a walking institution. By evening, you're in the hall again. There's a small fire, a meal of pottage and dark bread. Your squire fidgets with his training sword by the hearth. You want to tell him how little it all matters. The jousts, the titles, the glory. But you don't. He needs to believe it still means something. Outside, it starts to rain. You hear it tapping against the shutters and dripping through that damned leak in the ceiling. You make a mental note to ask the carpenter again. He'll say he's waiting on timber, He's always waiting on something. You lean back in your chair and watch the flames dance in the hearth. Your left knee throbs. Your right hand has gone stiff again from the last melee. You rub it slowly, absent-mindedly. The cost of duty is never paid in full. It's just collected in smaller, daily tolls. You think of the banner hanging over your seat. It's faded now. The colors dulled by smoke and years. The sigil, once a proud eagle or lion or some beast, barely visible. No one remembers what it stands for anymore, but you do. It's your family, your oath, your name. It means something, or it used to. Sometimes you catch yourself dreaming of just riding off, leaving the land, the squabbles, the endless errands of nobility. Just you and your sword, riding to nowhere in particular. A night without a banner, a purpose, or anyone to disappoint. But dreams don't pay taxes, and tomorrow the steward will be back with more problems. A flooded field, a stolen cow, a marriage dispute turned violent. The villagers will look to you not for chivalry, but for answers. And if you don't have them, you'll be one step closer to irrelevance. So you finish your meal in silence. You pat your squire on the shoulder. You tell the steward to check the granary in the morning. You stare at the fire until your eyes blur. And when you finally drag yourself to your chamber, you do so knowing that today's battles weren't fought with a blade, but they drained you all the same. Because being a knight isn't just about the wars you fight. It's about holding everything together when the rest of the world is trying to come apart. The sun rises, and with it, your responsibilities. Again. But today's no ordinary day. It's tournament day. Not just a game. Not a bit of pageantry for the bored nobles. Not for you. For you, it's a battlefield with rules. A place to prove you still matter. You barely slept. Your bruises haven't healed from the last bout, but your name was called, and you can't afford to turn it down. Declining a challenge, especially when issued in front of other lords, means weakness, and weakness in your world is blood in the water. Your squire helps you into your armor. It's heavier than you remember. Or maybe you're just older. The plates creak as they settle into place. Your breath fogs against the inside of your helm. You can barely see, barely move. But you know the dance. Every motion is muscle memory now. Muscle and scars. Outside, the tourney grounds are alive. Flags flutter, horses stamp, trumpets blare. Nobles in fine silk sip wine from pewter cups, while peasants crowd behind rope lines, eager for blood. You, meanwhile, sit atop your horse in 100 pounds of steel, sweating and praying your bladder holds. Historians still argue over whether tournaments were true displays of knightly valor or just a thinly veiled excuse for sanctioned violence. You know the answer. Both. You enter the lists. Across from you, another knight lowers his visor. You recognize his crest. He's younger, leaner, richer. His armor gleams. Yours is dulled from use, but you have experience and a deep understanding of pain tolerance. The lance is placed in your hand. You steady it. The crowd hushes, then the charge. Your horse thunders beneath you. everything narrows. No noise, no color, just a tunnel of dust and speed and steel. Then impact. Your shoulder explodes in pain. You manage to stay mounted, barely. His lance shattered on your pauldron, but yours missed. You circle around for another pass. Second charge. This time your aim is better. Your lance strikes square on his chest, and you see his head snap back. He falls. The crowd roars. You don't celebrate. You almost threw up. The marshal raises your arm. You nod to the crowd, but your hand trembles in the gauntlet. A mix of adrenaline and damage. Later, when you peel the armor off, you'll find a fresh bruise the size of a goose egg. But for now, you hold your posture like it didn't hurt. Because it always hurts. The next event is melee. Not the polite kind. 30 men in a muddy field, swinging blunted weapons at each other like a brawl in full plate. You sign up, not because you want to, but because he's in it. That one, the bull, the one who sneered at your banner last winter feast, called you a hedge knight with delusions of grandeur. You haven't forgotten. This is your chance. When the horn blows, chaos erupts. Axes, maces, swords, everywhere. You dodge a mace swing, parry a sword, catch a shoulder in the gut. It's less about chivalry now, and more about survival and revenge. You find him. He doesn't see you at first, but when he does, you both hesitate for half a second. That's enough. You lunge, knock his blade aside, and drive your hilt into his gut. He stumbles. You follow up with a boot to his chest. He goes down. You don't strike again. Not because you're merciful, but because he knows who felled him. That's all you needed. That and the cheers from the crowd that feel hollow and far away. After the melee, you stagger back to the tents. Your squire helps you out of your armor. Every joint aches. You're bleeding from a nick under your arm where the plate shifted. You don't remember when that happened. Someone hands you a cup of wine. You drink. Not because you're thirsty, but because it dulls everything. Later there's a feast. Meat, mead, music. You sit at a long table, flanked by nobles you barely know. They laugh, toast, spill wine. One praises your performance. Another jokes about how you gave that brat what he deserved. You nod, smile faintly. But your mind is elsewhere. On the ache in your ribs, the dull throb in your shoulder, the creeping realization that you're not as fast as you used to be. You spot your opponent from earlier. He's smiling now, surrounded by flatterers. He glances your way and raises a cup. Respect or mockery? You can't tell anymore. A troubadour starts singing a ballad about knightly valor. Everyone cheers. You sit there, sipping your wine, and wonder when this all became theater. When did you become a performer in armor instead of a warrior? Historians still debate whether these tournaments truly prepared knights for war, or if they became distractions from it, glorified carnivals where honor was scripted and danger sanitized. You've seen both. You've bled in war. You've bled in sport. And some days, the difference feels like a matter of lighting an audience. When the feast ends, you return to your quarters, exhausted. Your squire is already asleep, snoring softly on a pile of straw. You sit down, unlatch your boots, and wince. Your feet are blistered. Your back is stiff. Your ears still ring from the crowd. You think about your father. He was a knight too. Broke his hip in a melee and never walked right again. Died coughing in a cold bed. No songs for him. No tournaments in his honor. You wonder what they'll say about you when your banner finally drops from the hall. Not much, probably. But for now, you're still standing, still riding, still fighting. And in this world, that counts for something. You wake to pain, a dull, throbbing ache in your shoulder, your ribs, your knees, everywhere really. The kind of soreness that settles deep, refusing to budge. You swing your legs over the edge of the cart, every movement reminding you that even nights get old. Today is not a day of battle, not officially. It's a day of judgment, of strategy. You're summoned to the hall by your liege lord, whose lands you protect and whose power you extend through your sword arm and your reputation. And today, that reputation is your armor. Your duties have shifted. No longer just a fighter, you're expected to rule, at least in a local sense. A minor land dispute between peasants, a poacher caught in the forest, a levy that hasn't been paid. These problems are small, but each one stacks onto the weight you carry. You sit in a chair that isn't quite a throne, too splintered, too stiff, but it marks your status all the same. One farmer accuses another of stealing pigs. Another weeps over trampled crops. You listen, nod, try not to let your mind drift. This is power, they say. But it feels more like refereeing a game where no one ever wins. Historians still argue whether knights were genuine enforcers of local justice or merely strong arms for feudal lords. You suspect both are true. You've served under men who were generous and fair, and others who wouldn't flinch at burning a village over unpaid tribute. Outside the hall, a messenger waits. He brings word from the border. Raiders. Again. They've been testing your defenses for weeks now. Slipping past patrols, torching hayricks, vanishing into the woods. You suspected they'd escalate. You dispatch scouts, draft a letter to your captain. Your hand cramps halfway through. You used to write quickly. Now every line is a task. You shake it out, finish the note and seal it with your crest. At midday, you inspect your men. Some are veterans, like you. Grizzled, quiet, eyes like wolves. Others are boys, barely shaving, nervous fingers twitching on their belts. You speak softly. A few words of encouragement, a reminder of duty. One vomits behind the stables when he thinks no one's watching. You saw yourself in him once. Your armor remains nearby, cleaned and repaired from the last tournament. It gleams again, but that shine means little to you now. You check the straps, oil the joints. You don't know when the next real battle will come, but you want to be ready. You always want to be ready. Afterward, you ride the perimeter of your holding. The fields are golden this time of year, and the wind carries the scent of hay and damp soil. It could be beautiful, if you weren't constantly scanning the tree line for signs of movement. You spot nothing today, but you don't relax. Knighthood wasn't supposed to mean anxiety, but here you are. Part warrior, part administrator, part watchdog. Always listening for danger, always solving someone else's problems. Not because you want to, but because it's what's expected. The sun dips. A group of children run past the chapel, chasing each other with wooden sticks and makeshift shields. One shouts, "I'm Sir Reynold, the Dragon Slayer," and waves a broken broomstick like it's Excalibur. You smile for a moment, then you hear the bell. 3 short peals. Trouble. You gallop back to the keep. A scout has returned, breathless, bloodied, one eye swollen shut. He stammers his report. A larger force this time. Dozens, maybe more. Not just raiders. They're organized, armed. You convene with your captain. Pull out maps. Count your men. Not enough. Were enough. You'll need to send for reinforcements, but that will take days. You'll need to hold. You spend the night making decisions no one else wants to make. Who guards the gate? Who rides to the nearby fief? Which villages to evacuate first? There's no perfect solution, only sacrifice.